Lovely. So hello, Liam. How are you doing this morning on a sunny day?
Hello, I'm doing very well, thank you. Yep, I'm in a slightly cavernous classroom, just to get some peace and quiet from some workmen. But no, doing very well.
Excellent. And we have the launch of Man at Sea next Friday, I want to say, on the 30th. And it's the first novel for Fly on the Wall, so it's very exciting for us as much as yourself feels like a Fly on the Wall baby.
Good. Yeah, well, obviously it feels like my baby as well. Yeah, so we've got a launch on Thursday in Glasgow,
Amazing.
and then Friday in Stirling. So 30th of June and 1st of July. So we're straddling the summer months.
Yes. So on Thursday it's at Waterstones, Glasgow, isn't it? The Argyle Street branch, and then for the Book Nook on the 1st of July.
Yep, which is my well, it's probably my favourite bookshop, but it's also very much my 7-year-old daughter's favourite bookshop. So that'll be really nice to have it in there.
Will she be overwhelmed that her dad is signing books in her favourite bookshop?
I mean, I'd love to say yes, but no, I think she'll probably just be a little bit she tends to take these things in her stride, and actually her question more often is when her book will be in a bookshop rather than any kind of what I'm doing.
What does your daughter write?
She writes quite a lot of kind of, I guess you'd call them fantasy narratives, but there's quite a lot of kind of Egyptian lore in them as well. But yeah, she loves getting just a random scrap of paper and jotting away, which is lovely.
Yeah, that's great. A budding novelist in the house.
Exactly.
And when did you start writing, Liam?
Good question. I think I started writing at school, as in secondary school.
Yeah.
But I probably started taking it seriously when I was 18. So when I was 18, in Scotland, we do what's called an advanced higher, which is like it's kind of like an A level, but actually it's almost a level above an A level. Anyway, it's not important. We were doing this qualification in English, and part of it was writing short stories. And this writer called Valerie Thornton came into the class to teach a workshop, and wrote at the end of the story. I can't remember what the story was or what it was about, but she wrote at the end of it, "I'd like to publish this." And she was editing an anthology called New Writing Scotland. And so I submitted it to that, and then went through edits and got it published. And that's when I was really like, well, this is something that I can do. But it also gave me a slightly false kind of impression of how publishing works. And that, I'd just kind of written something and somebody had come along and said, "Oh yeah, well, let's put it in this book then." So I kind of, for the next decades, spent my time kind of thinking, "Oh well, I can just do that again." And as you well know, it's not quite as simple as that. So it was a lovely first experience. But that was the first time that I thought, right, that's what I'm going to then pursue, chase that feeling again, and that sense of accomplishment again. So that's why I then went to university and studied creative writing and English and creative writing, and pursued that all the way through, as much as possible.
Cool. I love that happened. That's kind of like a Hollywood moment for writers, isn't it?
Exactly. And I owe her a great deal in so much as I think it's very kind of, well, maybe this isn't true, but I think it's quite easy to be encouraging, right? And to say, "Oh, this is really good, you should keep going." But she actually offered me something really concrete. And it meant that I had something in those kind of, because, there's quite a few barren years between that and my first novel. And I think it really gave me something really tangible to hold on to. So I owe her a lot, and it's really nice meeting her now, with more publications under my belt, and chatting to her about that moment.
So with your first novel, which was with Myriad Editions, wasn't it? I feel like 2012?
That was 2012, yeah. So exactly a decade ago.
Nice. So did you approach Myriad without an agent at that point? Was it sort of like a manuscript, you just sent it out into the wild and didn't really know how to approach, or did you have a sort of strategy for that?
So I knew how to approach in so much as I had a previous novel that didn't go anywhere, but kind of got kind of close in a couple of places. You know, I kind of sent it to a few agents who were kind of interested or asked to see the full thing, and got similar with publishers. But with So It Is, it was a slightly different situation because it was my PhD thesis as well. So I knew it was kind of, what's the word, kind of tight enough. You know what I mean? It had been edited and seen by enough eyes that I knew that the quality, just in terms of like the copy editing almost, was of a high enough level. So I was fairly kind of happy to be sending it out. But Myriad were a really good fit because they were enthusiastic about the kind of, as you are, Isabelle, about the kind of political commentary aspect of it. Like, there was no sense at any point during the editorial of them trying to kind of tone it down, or not saying that necessarily another publisher would have, but they bought into just what the novel was trying to say very quickly, which was lovely, and hopefully just carried right through into the actual finished book as well.
Definitely. And once you'd had that first book, was that when you started looking for an agent for yourself, or did that come after the second one with Myriad?
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever, I'm sure lots of writers can relate to this, I don't know if I've ever stopped looking for an agent. In that I probably sent So It Is to a few agents. Can't massively remember doing that, but I'm pretty sure I would have. Yeah, I did approach a couple of agents with The Busker, which was the second book with Myriad, but because it was already under contract, there wasn't a lot for an agent to do. So in a lot of senses, it was just kind of forming relationships, I guess. So yeah, the search for an agent then picked up again after that second book, when I was looking for an agent for my third book, which became Man at Sea, and my fourth book, which I've written subsequently to Man at Sea. So yeah, it's a never-ending cycle. That.
And when you found an agent, how many years were you with them? Because I know that it came to an end. It didn't sort of come to fruition in that they could find you publishers for your work. But what is that process like? So they accept you, and then are you sort of kept updated as to where they're sending it?
Oh yeah, totally. So my agent that I had was not for Man at Sea, was for the novel that I wrote subsequently, which is, I mean, I would call Man at Sea a thriller, but it's much more of a kind of thriller with a capital T, if you see what I mean. And so we probably had about 2 years working on that together, me and her. We've parted ways in so much as we're no longer pursuing that book, but this is almost what I'm saying about networking. Like, she will then look at my next book and potentially take it on. So we're not keeping that, we're not keeping the kind of formal relationship, but you know, there is a kind of first refusal there in place.
Yeah, that's positive.
Yeah, it is. And so yeah, it was about 2 years that I was working on that novel with her, and it was all really positive. We actually got a lot of really good feedback on the book. Did a lot of kind of reworkings on it. There was one piece of feedback in particular about the ending from an editor that meant that I then reworked the ending, but it just didn't quite find a home at any of those big publishing houses. So I'm now going to take it forward and look for another home for it, which is good and fine. But yeah, she was great about keeping me up to date about where it was going, and that was really nice for me to see that side of it, because I've always personally done that side of things myself. You know, I've always been sending it out myself and keeping track of that myself.
Yeah.
And actually to see the people I don't think there's a right way of doing that, right? Both ways are valid ways. But the people that she could get it in front of were just different to the people that I could get it in front of.
Oh yeah, of course.
So yeah, it was really nice to see that side of things. And I think it can feel a bit like agents and indeed publishers are like gatekeepers, but actually they work, advocate so hard for every single book that they take on. So yeah, I would encourage people not to think of them as gatekeepers, because as people trying to keep them out of the industry, because actually they're actively looking for people to take into the industry, because that's how they make their bread and butter.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that they don't want to take you; they do actively want to make money from you. So
totally, they're really, really looking for something that grabs them, and that passion essentially then takes the whole thing over and provides the momentum for the whole journey, hopefully.
Absolutely. So it's not actually the tale of woe that when, if it comes to an end with an agent, there's still connections to be made. And, I guess everyone's always saying it's the right time in an industry for a certain book. Sometimes it's not, and I guess that was the case with the current 4th novel that you have. And, it might not be the case for the next one. So I guess, you've got peaks and troughs, haven't you, in your career, that
you've got peaks and troughs.
Not everyone is going to be taken.
Totally. And I think firstly, having a manuscript completed is an achievement for any writer.
Yeah.
And indeed, having a manuscript that you're kind of happy to send out is an achievement. But I think these things always, for whatever reason, it's really annoying, and I'm really impatient about it, but they always take time. Man at Sea, I think from the first time that I thought I had a completed draft. So the first time I thought I had a completed draft of it was probably 2017. So that's 5 years ago.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I don't know, did you ever, so with Man at Sea, with that sort of breadth of years, did you ever get sick of working on it? Do you think, I'm done editing it now, Isabelle, shut up?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's where I've always been a kind of what I'd call an irons in the fire writer. Which I think I just made up there, but what I mean by that is I always like to have a few projects on the go. So like whilst one manuscript is being submitted, you're working on another one, or you're maybe editing one that you've resurrected from a while ago, so that it's not just, so that you're never in a position where you're just waiting for an answer. Because if you're just waiting for an answer, I mean, one, it's hugely frustrating, and two, the likelihood is the answer is going to be no. So yeah, you don't want to kind of build that up in your mind. If you've got something else to be going on and working on, that's great. So the draft of Man at Sea that I ended up submitting to Fly on the Wall was actually one that was massively reworked. But one of the main reasons it was massively reworked was because I'd written the thriller with the capital T in between.
Yeah.
So I went back to Man at Sea and actually tightened a lot of the plot. I think before it was much more kind of meandering, and that dreaded word that publishers sometimes euphemistically use, which is gentle or quiet. It was a very gentle and quiet book, and so I really went in and I kind of just tightened and pushed that the underlying plot, if you like. So I'm much happier with it than.
This is the interesting thing about your work, because I think, potentially when you start a novel, you're sort of not thinking about it in a strategic way. Whereas for you, and probably, I don't know if you would agree with this, but for me, writing the genre of a thriller has taught me more about plot than possibly any other genre, because of the way that you have to position the conflicts and the resolution, and you can literally say like 80% this is, dark night of the soul resolution, the next 20% is action. You've got to have it in. You can't sort of do the structure that you want almost. You have to go, right, well, I've done that. It's not going to fit. It has to go into that structure. So I guess now you're sort of more analytic about the way that you're looking at your novels.
100%. I love formulas and templates, and I think formulas and templates are not to be used as like sitting down and you need to hit those moments, but almost as like a diagnostic tool. So I did a script writing development course with the Scottish Film Talent Network a few years ago. And they wouldn't, so the whole idea was that writers from other mediums would come in and write a script, short film script, but they wouldn't let you write the script until you'd got the structure. So they were like, well, actually, it's not got a climax yet. So no, you can't write your script. And, you know, it's the setup isn't quite working yet, so you can't write your script. And it was again quite frustrating, but hugely useful to look at it with that kind of lens to it. And it definitely tightened my plotting and meant that, yeah, when I went back to Man at Sea, it became this much more, I still wouldn't necessarily call it plot driven. I think it's still probably character driven, but it just meant that the underlying events kind of, scanned through much more, and I knew what was happening when and kind of why. So there's much more of a cause and effect through it than there was before. And
I guess we were saying as well that when you were saying about character driven, you said that you started with a character and built a plot around it for Man at Sea, didn't you? So maybe you can talk us through the inception of that.
Yeah, totally. So Man at Sea, the first thing that I wrote on Man at Sea was, well, actually, I suppose really was the prologue in a lot of ways, but was the young boy Joe, who's 11 years old at the start of the novel, during the war, wondering what's happened to his dad, because there's a telegram that's received in Malta, and that was really the start of it, was this idea of a young boy not quite understanding exactly what was happening around him in terms of the war, but also this kind of gap between what we as reader would probably understand the telegram to probably contain and what he understood it to contain. So it was really starting with that and kind of following his kind of passage through the wartime years and finding out about his dad and his family. So that became like the first kind of half of the novel, the 1940s context. And then I started writing about the 20 years later. But actually, in terms of the writing of the first draft, I wrote it as wartime in the first half, and then break, and then 20 years later. And going back to talking about plotting, I quite quickly realized after that first draft that actually what I wanted was a backwards and forwards, so that the two timeframes spoke to each other. So the 1960s timeframe is about Stuart and Beth being Joe's stepmother, traveling back to Malta to find Joe and kind of connect those bits of family. So yeah, it was character driven, and I think it still remains quite character driven. But like I say, very quickly then I found a story that I really wanted to trace through in both timeframes, and hopefully stories that speak to each other as well.
At what point was it that you found your grand's journals about the time of the war?
Yeah, so my grand kept a diary of, so just after the war, 1956, around the time of the Suez Crisis, her and my granddad lived in Malta, and actually my mum lived in Malta. She was tiny at the time, probably about 2 or 3. And yeah, it was as I was researching that later time, the 60s, and my mum quite kind of casually said, "Oh yeah, I used to live in Malta." And it was because my granddad was in the Navy, so he was stationed all over the place, and my mum was actually born in New Zealand. But then my mum said, "Oh well, we might have some of her old daybooks," and so they're in a lot of ways they're like accounts of just the day to day. You know, that put the washing out at 12 noon, and a lot about my mum not napping in the heat and that kind of stuff. But just that actually was hugely useful in giving just those small details of what life was like in Malta at the time, and to have that kind of emotional connection to what was happening, rather than, because obviously if you're reading kind of history books about it, it's the kind of facts and figures and details much broader. about what convoy arrived when, rather than about what the weather was like. So it was hugely useful. But yeah, it was probably quite far into the process that I actually found those diaries, or my mum gave them to me. And the other thing that was great about that was that at the time my grandfather was still alive. So I went to his care home and just had a chat with him about Malta, which was really, really nice, and meant that a lot of, I feel like there's a lot of them in there now, which is lovely.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you were saying about the detail of milk on the front doorstep curdling that she wrote down in her diaries, and you thought, oh, that's a great detail, I'm going to put that in to show that it's getting hotter.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's very easy to kind of just write it got hotter, or give like a temperature reading. But yeah, the small detail from my grand's diary was that she'd noticed the milk going sour on the step. So I absolutely nicked that and put that in, because those small details are absolutely, I think, what makes historical fiction kind of real. And so for that same reason, I went to Malta quite a lot and just kind of walked the streets, because I think you get a lot more kind of sensory detail just from kind of being there. And that is actually, I think, what you connect with in historical fiction way more than, like I say, those kind of facts and figures. Because if you want that kind of impression of history, then you can read a kind of historical account.
Definitely. I think we're doing a good job of not giving away too much about Man of Sea, but just suggesting the journey and the details, so that if people want to go away and find out about it, obviously it's on the Fly on the Wall Press website, and Waterstones, in person and online. Blackwell's, again, the same, pretty much anywhere you buy a book. Obviously, those are better than Amazon. Yes. So how are you feeling in general? I know that the writing part is a little bit different to the performance part, and I don't know how you feel about performing your work, whether this is something really stressful or something that you're naturally happy to do.
Loaded question. No, I'm always very nervous before like launches and stuff, but I do really enjoy them, and that kind of process of bringing the book kind of into a readership, if you like, because I think, yeah, it's really nice to make that connection, and I really like getting reviews and feedback, although obviously if it's positive, that's better than the opposite. But no, I really like that process. I think it's stressful, and it's kind of emotionally draining in a completely different way from writing. But no, I do enjoy it, and I think also like it kind of goes by so quick. The kind of period around the launch of a novel, kind of you get a couple of weeks if you're lucky of kind of hoopla. So yeah, you've got to enjoy it, because it's gonna go again pretty quick, and then you're going to be chasing it for the next 7 years or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I'll set out to enjoy it, definitely.
Amazing. Best of luck, Liam, and send lots of videos for us when you do it so we can watch and enjoy.
I definitely shall. I think my wife is very much on video duty.